Hey everybody, today I'm doing a bit of a deep dive into petunias. So I'm going to cover what I think are some of the best performing petunias on the market. I'm going to give you some petunia tips, and then I'm also going to help you understand maybe the differences between some of the different varieties that are out there. And to help me with this conversation, I've created this little chart, and I've organized some of my favorite varieties based on their size. So the little boxes there each represent a petunia, and the height and width of the box shows us the size of that petunia. So you can see I have some very compact ones as well as some super vigorous ones on here, and I want to start with the smaller ones because when I'm looking at petunias and which ones I think are going to be the ones that I like the most, usually if the size kind of maxes out at 12 inches, I'm like, that probably isn't going to get big enough to start covering the edge of the pot. And that's one of the criteria that I have for a type of petunia that I like to grow, is that ability to trail a little bit. So when I look at the width, a lot of times like the little seed pack petunias that you get, they come in like the 4, 6, or 8 packs. A lot of times those varieties, they don't get past 12 inches, and they tend to be more like that 8 to 12, so you never know, when they're going to be in there. Whereas the varieties that I'm specifically talking about, like this one that I'm going to talk about first, is the Cannonball series, and it says it maxes out at between, goes 8 to 12 inches. I've seen it get a little bigger than that, and it's a really great series because the Cannonball series, first of all, the habit is very, very nice and mounded, and it does trail over the edge of the pot. And the good thing about some of these smaller varieties is that if you have petunias that you've grown before that are more vigorous and they get kind of leggy on you, or they get a little crazy and they kind of take over some of your pots or outdo some of your other plants, these less vigorous varieties can play a little nicer with some of the other plants that are out there. Now that said, if you put them with a really super vigorous variety of plant, then they might lose out. But for the most part, they're really good mixes with other plants. And like the Cannonball series, covered with flowers, and the series itself, like no matter which color you get, they tend to grow just about the same. So that's another nice feature about some of these varieties, where the fact that that the sizing and the habit tend to be consistent throughout the series. And so Cannonball, really nice one. The other one I'm going to talk about is Petunia, another one that stays pretty compact for the most part, but I have seen it get quite a bit larger than 12 inches. In fact, I would say that one I've seen get more into that 16-inch range. Same thing with the Cannonball. Sometimes towards the end of the season, they're actually quite large, but they're nice and slow growing. That's the other nice part of them, is that because of that gradual growth, they keep that habit. They're just really, really nice. Now I'm going to move up like one more size, and I'm going to start with the Cascadia series. And I'm going to be honest with you, Cascadias, it's like on the cusp. It almost didn't make the cut. And that's because I find that Cascadias, between the different colors, there's a lot of variation. Some of them, get really, really big. Some of them are a little bit more compact. They have a little bit different growth habit among colors. So that frustrates me a little bit. And also, some of the most popular colors of the Cascadias are also sold under different names. So you can get like the nicest Cascadias under different names. And to give you an example of what those are, like the Cascadias Indian Summer is also sold as Supertunia Honey. The Cascadias Petea is also sold as Supertunia Picasso and Purple. Cascadias Autumn Mystery is also Ray Shadow. At least I'm pretty sure on that. I've checked on the plant patents and it looks like they match up. So, and I've grown all 6 of those varieties and they look exactly the same. So Cascadias is one of those that most of them are really good, and you can tell because like other series are stealing them or sharing. So they do appear elsewhere. The sizing on them though is kind of strange to me, because when I look at it, it says they get 14 to 18 inches wide, but I've seen some of the varieties of Cascadias get like 24 to 28 in size. So that's where that sizing gets a little bit confusing with them. SureShot is one where they're very consistent, and that's why they call them SureShot, because they're a sure thing. They all bloom at the same time. They get similar in size. They have similar flower coverage. And so it's a really good all-purpose petunia, and nice size, does a great job. And all the varieties that I'm talking about, for the most part, are really good about being self-cleaning, so you don't have to do any deadheading or anything like that. Usually the blooms fall off on their own. Of course, you can always deadhead if you see little dead ones on there. That's not a big deal with petunias, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Also, I'm going to talk about Surfinia, and Surfinia is one of my favorite series of petunias because, I don't know, they're like a good sturdy petunia for the most part. They tend to have like more thick and supple stems and really good habit. Like they tend to be very dense and covered with flowers as well. And the Surfinia series, now there are different series within the Surfinia family. So the original Surfinia is a nice regular size does get over the edge of the pot, and they're just there. It's a really beautiful Petunia. And then I'll also mention the Dekko Petunia. That's not one I've grown a lot of, but that is a really popular one, especially in a lot of combos as well. And that one's another one that stays compact. You don't have to do a lot of trimming on it. You don't have to worry so much about that, the legginess or anything like that. For the most part, all the ones I've mentioned so far are pretty good about not getting leggy, except sometimes there's some of the colors of Cascadias that I have noticed do get leggy. So that's like a real plus when you don't have to worry about that. Now I'm going to get to one size up. Again, this is where the kind of regular Supertunia comes into the mix. So Supertunia is probably one of the best known varieties out there, and this is one that definitely does the cascading kind of action going on, so it does trail. And Supertunia did really change the market. I think they had been around since sometime in the 90s, but they really came into their own. I think it was around 2006 when Supertunia Royal Velvet and Supertunia Vista Bubblegum came out. Those are kind of the two of their best sellers. And what made these different, so prior to that, the big revolution in petunias was the wave petunia. And the wave, or the original wave anyway, grew very much where it would come up and it was pretty flat. So it would grow really flat, get lots and lots of blooms, and then it would start cascading over the edge of a container or keep creeping along the yard, and just was, you know, bright flowers, especially the original purple. That one's still available today. I think they call it classic purple wave or something like that. So that was how they normally grew. But then when Supertunia came on the market, that one had a little bit more of a mounding habit. So the branches tended to grow a little bit upward, and as they grew upward, they would kind of intertwine. And basically, after seeing the wave for so many years, which had this big giant waterfall coming off your things, these almost defied gravity because they were kind of lifted up, they had more bulk to them, and so suddenly like your 12-inch pot could suddenly look like it's a 3-inch ball of color. And so extraordinary Petunia, when it came out, now we're seeing a lot of those same characteristics in a lot of these other varieties, but still Supertunia is one of the best selling. They're always coming out with new colors, and the performance has been very consistent with Supertunias as well. So that's been a really popular one. So there's the original Supertunia, and then they have a new series that they're introducing this year called the Tiara series. Interesting enough, it gets to the similar width, I'm going to say, as a Supertunia, but it's going back to that little bit lower growth habit that we would used to see more in the waves. And right now it's available in two colors. I have one right here. This is the blue, and then there's also a pink. And what's interesting about it is the flower pattern on it. So it has a little bit of a white halo inside. It's a really beautiful one. I will say though, there is a difference between the two colors. So the pink is a much faster grower, gets big really fast. The blue, a little bit slower. It still gets very, very large, but it doesn't grow as fast as the pink, but it starts blooming sooner than the pink. So all of our blue Supertunia Tiara blues are in full bloom. Meanwhile, the pinks still hanging out waiting. In fact, there's two pinks in here and two of the blues in here. And so you can see the blue right now is putting on the show. A little bit later though, pink's going to show up and really do its thing. So there is still another Supertunia that I'll tell you about, but that's in a little bit further down when we get a little bit bigger yet. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Surfinia Heavenly series. So I talked about the Surfinias, the Heavenly series. They're a little bit bigger and they are gorgeous. I love these because they definitely do that kind of growing upward. They grow outward. I like the Surfinia Heavenlies too because they have a little bit more of a pointed petal, which I think is really nice. Gives it like a more of a frilly, lacy look. So they have a bit of elegance to them and make them look a little bit different than some of the mainstay petunias that we talk about. Next up is the Sanguna series. And this is a little bit like the Cascadias, where there's a little bit of inconsistency from across the different colors, but for the most part, it's a pretty strong performing series as well. But they do have a couple different sizes. So there's the regular Sanguna, but then there's also the Sanguna Patio. And Sanguna Patio is much more upright. It's more ball kind of shaped. It doesn't get as wide. Whereas the regular Sangunas get a nice trailing habit. They tend to cover the edge of the pot. I have noticed with the Sangunas, some of the like darker colors, like the Mega Purple or something like that, and the, what was the other one, Merlot or something like that, these darker colored ones tend to be, they were like fertilizer hogs. We had to give them more fertilizer more often in order to keep them in bloom. So that's one thing that I don't really love about them. Like I wish I could just treat them like the other ones, but I did notice that they were starting to diminish in flowers, but as soon as I gave them more fertilizer, they did better. So I was glad I learned that, but they seem like they're fertilizer hogs a little bit. The other thing is like the name Mega, when it's added on there, it just means it has bigger flowers than the other Sangunas. And you're going to find that with some of the other varieties. Like if it says extra large, doesn't mean the plant is necessarily extra large. It usually means the flower is extra large. So something to keep in mind when you're looking at those tags so that you don't get too confused about which ones are bigger and which ones are smaller. The next one I'll tell you from this category is the T series. And this is new in the US. I think it's been in Europe for a while, but this is a pretty nice one. There's a lot of different colors. We've been growing more of the vein series because that's what's available to us. And those get really giant flowers, decent size as far as, the size of plant, and good flower coverage, like really, really good. I have noticed with the veined ones, because the flowers are so big, like after a rain, they can look a little shabby for a little while. They usually perk back up pretty quick, but I did notice like right after that rain, they do kind of look a little weathered, but nothing like what we'd see with old petunias where once they got wet, they'd mold onto the leaves. I didn't see that with the T at all. Also, those big blooms on there are self-cleaning. I didn't do any cleaning on the ones that I had. So it's a beautiful series. And like I said, the veined ones are so stunning, like really unique look to them, like more intense and higher contrast veining than what I've seen in a lot of the other veined ones. So beautiful, beautiful petunia on that one. Now we're getting into the ones that I would say are definitely vigorous. So these are the ones that you have to be careful with what you plant them with, because if you put them with a less vigorous plant, they could overtake them or push them out or crowd them out. So be careful about that. The first one I'm going to tell you about is the SuperCal Premiums. So SuperCals are a type of petcoa, and a petcoa is a cross between a petunia and a calibrachoa. Nice thing about these is they don't have the sticky leaves that petunias tend to have. So that's kind of a nice feature with that. They also come in colors that most petunias don't come in. So you get some really unique, rich colors. The petals on them also are very thick and velvety, kind of silky looking. So I'm a big fan of these petcoas. They're absolutely beautiful. And the premium ones have kind of a big petunia size flower. So they're decent sized flower, and you treat them pretty much just like petunias. You fertilize them the same way, you plant them the same way, you water them the same. Sometimes I think the SuperCals might need just a tiny bit more water. So you want to make sure that you have them in a decent sized container because sometimes they get thirsty a little bit sooner, but they tend to hold up still really well. Even, if you kind of miss a watering or whatever, they tend to bounce back pretty well. So thank goodness for that. It's always horrible when you have a plant that doesn't respond well, once you abuse it. Like, I want to be able to abuse my plants and still have them look good, but that's not the case with all of them. But with a lot of these petunias, they can handle a little bit of abuse. You just can't push them too far. Now, next one I'm going to talk about is the Headliner series. So this is a really nice, vigorous variety. Lots of good colors in there, and they're also known for their Sky series. And the Sky series are speckled petunias, and it's probably one of the best speckled series out there. There are other ones out there that are quite beautiful, but that Sky series from Headliner, like really primo, really nice looking plant, and get good flower coverage on it. Colors are really nice on it, so I do like that one. And now I'm going to get to waves, but not the original waves. I'm talking about some of the new waves, because the newer waves tend to be maybe not quite as wide as the original waves, but they tend to get a little bit taller. So I'm going to tell you first about the E3 Easy Wave. So that's one kind of part of the family. They've been expanding the wave family to kind of meet demand and also to kind of serve different purposes. So these mounding and trailing varieties like the E3 Easy Wave and then the regular Easy Wave, which I think, I come into that one later on. That's even bigger yet. But the other one is the Shockwave, and the Shockwave is a little bit different size, has smaller flowers than the regular wave. So that's what the Shockwave is known for. But the E3's just a nice flowering habit, good size on it, good flower coverage. And if you're looking for a really good performing and more affordable variety, the waves tend to be a good way to go, because many of the varieties are available as seeds. So you could start seeds. That would be the best way to save money, but they're also often available in like the 4-pack, 6-packs, and 8-packs. So you can buy those smaller plants and they still end up getting really quite large. And it's one of the few varieties of like this that you can get small like that get that big, because a lot of the ones that you get small, they tend to stay a little bit smaller. So the waves are really good for that, and they're usually available at a lot of the big box stores. So just keep your eyes open for them, and the price is usually pretty reasonable for them. So that's always a good one. They're consistent, and you treat them just like any of the other petunias, and you give them a little love, they'll give you a lot more love back. So it's a good one. The other one I'm going to tell you about is another Supertunia, and this is the Supertunia Vista series. So this is the biggest of the Supertunias, and they do get really large. This is like the Supertunia Vista Bubblegum. It's probably the most famous petunia out there. It's oftentimes considered the gold standard because it just gets so big, so covered with flowers. It's absolutely incredible. So that's definitely a series that if you want big, Supertunia Vista is the way to go. It's important that when you're looking at your tags that you notice if it does say Vista, because sometimes the Vistas can be really aggressive. Now there is some variation between the different types. So Supertunia Vista Jazzberry tends to be a little bit more compact, whereas Supertunia Vista Bubblegum tends to be really, really big. Jazzberry tends to not get too leggy, whereas Vista Bubblegum can get a little leggy sometimes. And then there's like Silverberry and White and all these other colors that come in, and each one does have a little bit of variation in its growth. So they're not like a true series is what they would say. So they don't always match exactly, but they all get really big. They all get lots of flowers, and they get, their colors are usually pretty true to what they're supposed to be as well. So pretty impressive series. And then the last one that I'll tell you about from this size range is the SuperCal regular ones. So these are a little bit smaller flower than the premiums that I told you about, but these also get into that. I think most of the season they look a lot like a Supertunia, but eventually they can get quite large and get into that Vista category as well. Now, according to their sizing, they get to be the same size on their tags, but I think the really vigorous, bigger Vistas get bigger than the SuperCals, and the regular kind of normal sized Vistas tend to be similar in size. And now we're going to move on to the very vigorous varieties. So I'm going to start with the Dekko Maxx Pink. So I mentioned the Dekko series. Dekko Maxx Pink is a brand new one. It's the first one in the Maxx series. And this one gets a lot bigger than the regular Dekkos, and it even gets bigger than the Supertunia Vista Bubblegum. The color is very similar to that. I saw them growing side by side, and the Dekko Maxx gets wider. It doesn't get quite as high as the Supertunia Vista Bubblegum, but it gets a little bit wider, and it's a pretty incredible plant, covered in flowers, really, really nice. So this is one to watch because it's new, and I was really impressed with it everywhere I saw it, and it was consistent everywhere I saw it as well. And next up is the ColorRush series. So this is another very vigorous variety. It grows a lot like the Supertunia Vista series, so you get similar size, slightly different color options with that as well. So it's kind of nice to be able to have some different colors than what we see in just the Vista series from Proven Winners. And really good grower. I found it to be a good flowering variety as well. And I grew these side by side with Supertunia Vistas, and they were definitely comparable. In fact, in the video I had done, people had actually confused the two. They didn't know which was which. So that's a pretty good sign for a Petunia. If it can match up with the Supertunia Vistas, that's a pretty good sign. Talking about Supertunia Vistas as well, I forgot to mention the Supertunia Mini Vistas. So they're going to be similar in size, maybe more towards the size of the Supertunias, maybe a little bit bigger than that, but they have a little bit smaller flower than the regular Supertunias and the Supertunia Vistas. So just a little bit different as far as the flower goes, but otherwise still another really vigorous variety, really strong performer as well. So got to remember that. And then now I'm going to talk about the Easy Wave. So the Easy Wave was the improvement to the original wave. And this one, it's getting 30 to 39 inches across. So this is a very, very vigorous variety as well. These are really good in the landscape as well. So you can put them in containers. They do well there, but really good ones. Like, we're getting more into landscape category when we start talking about these really vigorous ones, partly because they cover so much space, so you don't need as many plants to cover all that space, and they just tend to do really well. They don't get lost in the yard at all. They tend to hold their own so well. The other one is the original wave. So when you look at the box on this one, the wave for the original wave is flat and long, whereas the Easy Waves do have that little bit of height going for them. So that's always nice to see. The last two I'm going to talk about really are landscape varieties. Now, people do grow these in containers. I've tried them in containers. I didn't love it in the containers because they're super vigorous. Like, when I say super vigorous, they're like really big. They have that caging feature where the branches interlock, and they tend to get like taller and taller. They can also get like octopus arms as well because they're so vigorous. So one is the Surfinia Sumo. So that one gets absolutely huge. It's cool because it gets so big, but I would rather see that one in the landscape. Again, some people grow these in containers and they love them that way. For me, they're more of a landscape variety. And then the Tidal Wave, which is it is the biggest of the wave family, absolutely huge, gargantuan type of plant. And that's another one, has that caging, so it can grow up, out, over, all over the place. Really, really a good performer, really large as well. So just a couple of tips that I'll give you about growing petunias, just my basics. So I do want to remind you guys that petunias, for these new varieties, they've been bred to have a lot of flowers, really vigorous growth, but that also means that they need an unnatural amount of fertilizer. Like, they want food every single week. So if you really want to get maximum potential out of your petunias, you're going to want to fertilize them once a week. And I would recommend a water-soluble fertilizer. So it could be Miracle-Gro, it could be the one from Proven Winners, could be Beat Your Neighbor fertilizer. To be honest with you, I've tried all the different kinds and they've all worked for me. So I don't think I'm going to really panic. If you find one and it's not the one with the bloom booster, don't worry about it. Bloom booster isn't necessary. You can manage just fine. In fact, petunias don't even need the bloom booster. They need to be able to grow more nodes for more flowers, and that doesn't require the phosphorus that we see in those bloom boosters. Anyway, getting a little sciencey there, and I'll avoid that. Also, when I plant my petunias into containers, I always put some time-release fertilizer, those little pellets, just any basic kind. So like a 10-10-10 would be a really good one to use. And the thing to note though is when you put those into your containers, because you have to water a container more often than you do in the ground, like the instructions might say, oh, it's going to last 3 months. There's a good chance that it won't quite last that long, that it's because of all that water running through it, it's going to dissolve those pellets a little bit faster. So I usually add a little bit more every month, and I use those. That's kind of more of a backup for me. So in case I miss fertilizing for a week, or in case that's the other thing, like if there's lots of rain and my plants are just drowning or whatever, and I can't add more water to add the fertilizer, at least I know when it's raining, they're getting that fertilizer in there as well. That is one of the hard things about petunias, is like if you have them outside, and here in northern Michigan, we will get certain stretches where it's just raining and raining for 7 days straight. Last spring was really bad for a lot of people. I had a lot of people writing me saying, like, it has not stopped raining for 2 weeks. My petunias look terrible. And usually when petunias get too much water, they start to wilt. So a lot of people immediately think that their petunias are thirsty. No, make sure you put your finger like in the pot, or you lift it up. And if it's heavy, make sure that you don't add more water, because that's the most common mistake that people make when they see a wilting petunia, is they assume wilting means thirsty. That's not always the case. So if it's wilting because it is thirsty, so it's really dry, you pick it up and it's like, whoa, super light, you're going to want to gradually add water back into it, because it's going to take a while for that soil to start absorbing. You're going to find that you're going to put the water in and it probably is going to start running out the bottom right away. That does not mean that it's resaturated, right? Resaturated. You're going to add the water, come back, say 10 minutes to a half hour later, add some more water, add some more again, and then eventually that soil will rehydrate, and hopefully your plant didn't suffer so much that it's going to struggle. Usually, if you catch it in time, they do just fine and they bounce right back. So another thing to watch out for. Other thing is pests. So budworm is really common. So it's a worm that goes and eats the flowers and really can decimate your plants. Like in one night, people can lose a whole batch of petunias. And it's an organic treatment called BT, and it's a targeted pesticide. So they say it really only affects those worms, those particular worms. And so if you want to have petunias and you have budworm, you're probably going to have to spray. There aren't a lot of options. And we don't have a big problem with budworm by us, at least not yet. But we do have earwigs, and earwigs will do the same thing. They eat the inside of the flower. So for earwigs, and those are those ugly little scary little things with the hooks on the back of their kind of tail end. We use Sluggo Plus, or like Come and Get It is another one that has it. It is specifically like a slug bait that also has something extra in it that it attracts the earwigs and they eat it and they die. So that is important to have that handy, because earwigs are another one that will kind of take it down. When you're using things like Sluggo or Come and Get It or any of those other little pellety type things, it's going to say like put a teaspoon in or whatever. Don't do it. You only put in what you need. So what I'd say is grab 3 pellets and just kind of sprinkle those in, or maybe in this pot I might put 6 in there. Then check the next day or the day after. If the pellets are still there, you don't need to add more. If they're gone, add more immediately. So that's, I think, more important. If you put a whole bunch on and you don't have any bugs, number one, you're wasting the bait, but also it turns to kind of this moldy, mushy mess that doesn't look very attractive, and it was completely unnecessary because you didn't have a problem with slugs or earwigs or snails. So just put a couple in and watch it. It's pretty easy to do too, and they're little white pellets, so they're pretty easy to spot. So don't waste it on there. It's just not necessary. And it also tells you like, yes, I have that problem, or is it something else? I also want to talk about pot size. Like probably by next month, I'm going to be getting a question a day from people going, how many plants do I put in a pot? And Okay, so if you ask like proven winners, they're going to say, oh, 12-inch pot, and you're having Supertunia Vistas in there, you need to put 5 plants. No, don't do it. Don't do it. The only time I would put that many plants in a 12-inch container is if I needed it to fill out really fast. So let's say it's, you know, May 15th and my kid's having their graduation party on June 16th, and I need these pots to really fill out. I want them to look great for the party. Pack them full. Put 5 plants in, hey, put 6 in if you want. And that way they will grow, they'll fill out really nice, they'll look great at that time when you need them to look really good. Just realize that at some point, probably in July, you're gonna be needing to really pay attention to water and fertilizer on these plants, because pretty much they will take up all the space they can. There's no more extra room for anything. They're depending on you completely for their water and fertilizer, so you can't miss anything. Also, if you're finding that you're watering these more often, so fertilizing with that water-soluble fertilizer once a week, so instead of watering regularly, you're using that water-soluble fertilizer mixed in with your water once a week. When you get into those times of the season where maybe you're watering twice a day or 3 times a day, it's a good idea to fertilize more frequently if you want to keep the performance going. So sometimes, like if you say once every 3rd watering, that's a good way to kind of keep track of it if you want to make sure that you're really getting a lot of fertilizer in there. Otherwise, you might just say, okay, I always fertilize on Friday, but I'm also going to do a little bonus one on Tuesday. That's okay too, no problem there. Now, if you're in a situation where you're watering 3 times a day, that could mean you could be adding fertilizer every single day. I'm going to be honest with you, I wouldn't go that far. I would let them kind of hold off on the fertilizer and just see how far I can push them without fertilizer, because that's a lot of work to keep fertilizing them that much. So that's my 2 cents on that. Now back to the number of plants per pot. So if I'm going from, say, these 2 categories here, I would say you could easily get away with 1 or 2 plants depending on how big your pot is. So if you have a 12-inch pot, you could get away with 1 plant per pot. And I know people hear me say that and they think I'm crazy. I have the proof. I've done some videos where we only put 1 plant in there, and the only thing is it takes a little longer to get that size, but usually by mid-July they're absolutely huge. And sometimes I think that they actually get as full, if not fuller, as one that had a lot of plants in it. So if you're trying to save money, buy a really vigorous type of Petunia and use fewer of them and just be a little bit more patient. For good measure, putting 2 in, and people always feel weird about putting just 2. Like they always feel like they have to have odd numbers, or if I have 3 colors, I just pack them right in the middle, and that way that I kind of, as they're growing, I just kind of pick up the little stems here, and like I'll say, oh, this one needs to go a little bit this way, this one needs to go a little bit that way. It works out for me, and you can't really tell that I only use 3 plants, whereas the instructions might say you need 6 plants because you need, you know, 1 on this side, 1 on this side, and you need to rotate around. Not absolutely necessary. So, oh boy, I'm kind of talking for a long time, but I can talk about petunias all day. Maybe I should just do a care video for petunias separately. Maybe I'll do that as well. I'll be repeating some of the stuff. So if you watch this, you kind of took the master class. If you watch the other one, you're going to get the more condensed, more focused version. How's that? Is there anything else on my list that I want to talk about? Start with good soil too. So if you're not getting fresh soil, if you're going to reuse old soil, make sure you're rejuvenating it. So you want to get some organic matter in there. You want to make sure that it's well fertilized and it has a lot of energy in there. That's really going to be important, okay? And then, do I have anything? Oh, watering. So people always want to know exactly how much water they should add, or they want to know, like, they want me to tell them, put 1 cup of water per day and everything will be great. That's not how plants are, partly because of our weather conditions and partly because the plants are constantly growing. So their needs change depending on their growth. So what I would say is give them water when they need it. So the important thing to kind of consider, like, get used to the weight of the pot. So you'll kind of get to know how heavy or how light these pots should be. So that's one way. Early in the season though, it's really easy to overwater them because the roots haven't developed yet, so they don't take up as much water. So you have to be careful. And I always say, like, actually put your finger in the dirt and wait until the top inch is pretty much dry before you add more water. As the season progresses though, you're going to find yourself needing to add more and more water, especially once we get to the heat of the summer. So that's where having a bigger container with fewer plants can really help you. So you can, you won't be watering 3 times a day if you choose the right size pot with the right number of plants. So anyway, I think I'm starting to talk a little bit in circles. This is getting a little too long, I think. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I'll save some of the information for another video. Thank you guys for watching though. I hope you got some information about petunias. I hope that you also kind of got a sense of how to read tags, because I don't know if you're gonna be able to find the variety that you specifically want, but at least if you know what size each one of these plants are, you can look at the tag of the one at your neighborhood nursery, and you'll know kind of where it fits in to this diagram. And I will put a link in the description to where you can actually download this if you wanted to, or you can look at it again. I have a page because I also have a hydrangea download that I have on there. So there'll be a couple other downloads on there from other videos. So just scroll down until you find the Petunia one. So I think that's all for now, you guys. Hopefully this wasn't too all over the place. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.